What? What are you doing on my pile of books? Hey everyone, it's Naomi. Welcome back to my channel. Today I am going to be going over the books that I read in September and October. So my September and October reading wrap up, and there are 8 books to get through, so let's get started. First up is a book called Coming to My Senses, a story of perfume, pleasure, and an unlikely bride by Alyssa Harad. And oh, by the way, I'm going to be going over my nonfiction reads first, and then getting into the fiction and fantasy reads in the second half of this video. I gave this, I think, 3 out of 5 stars. It's worth the read if you're interested in perfume at all. It's worth the read just for her beautiful descriptions of scent. She's very witty. I enjoyed her writing style, but I expected this to have more content about perfume in it, I guess, and there was a lot of side stories that she intertwined about other parts of her life, and I found myself getting bored and like, okay, when are we getting back to the perfume stuff? And it did all intertwine, but yeah, I don't know, it was okay. I enjoyed it, and I really loved her idea of a perfume-themed bridal shower. I thought that was really creative. I wish that there had been more about natural scent in here, because I am a natural botanical perfumer. I guess I was looking for more of that, and she focuses mostly on like mainstream chemical perfumes, chemical-based perfumes, which is fine. Some people are into that. I did enjoy this, and will add it to my little collection of scent-themed books. Next is a book that I read on Kindle on my iPad, and it is called Tiny House Living. I don't know if you can see that on that screen there. And I have become obsessed with tiny houses over the last month and read a whole book about them. It wasn't a huge book, it was maybe like 175 pages. I was thinking it would be mostly photos, but it was actually not. There was a couple of photos here and there, but a lot of information about the tiny house movement. If you're not familiar with that is, then you should look it up online. There's tons of YouTube videos of like tiny house tours and things like that, and I've also been watching a ton of those. I just think it would be really cool to live a more minimal lifestyle in something that's less than 400 square feet, and just pare down, you know, what you have to what you really need and love. You know, if you have a bigger house or apartment even, and the more closets you have, like, that can be nice, but at the same time you typically just end up filling them with stuff that you don't need, and I have found that to be true in my own life. And I found this to be very informative. There were breakdowns about numbers and, you know, costs and what it really takes to live in a tiny home, not just sort of dreaming about the beautiful spaces, but it got down to, you know, the facts about them, and there were, I think, maybe 8 or 9 actual examples and interviews with real people who have built real tiny houses and live in them. Next is a book that I read over the course of September and October. So this is called Miracles Now, 108 Life-Changing Tools for Less Stress, More Flow, and Finding Your True Purpose by Gabrielle Bernstein, one of my favorites at the moment. I love reading her work. And of course, there are 108 little tiny daily like meditations and just things to think about and other little exercises in here, and because there was that many of them, I didn't want to just breeze right through. I really wanted to take my time and only read 2 or 3 a day. So some days I read maybe 4, but I read this over the course of 2 months, and I cannot recommend this enough. Obviously 5 out of 5 stars. I feel weird even reading something like this because it's not, you know, a typical book that you read straight through, but I have bookmarked quite a few things in here, and this is something that I will keep reading over and over again and going back to the parts that I found really useful for my own life. And I guess I'll read a couple of examples for you, like Change Your Mood with a Ritual, Trust Your Gut. Those are some other ones that I marked. Rest, Relax, Restore, Harness the Power of Empathy. The F in Forgiveness is for Freedom. She goes over tapping points and EFT, or the emotional freedom technique, which can help with anxiety a great deal. And just a bunch of No is a Complete Sentence. I love that one. Meditate for Memory. There's so many different little mini meditations that you can do in here that really break it down into tiny bite-sized pieces. So if you're new to anything like this, then I would highly recommend it again. I also read Gabby's new book, which just came out in the end of September, and I read this first thing in October. It is called The Universe Has Your Back, Transforming Fear to Faith. And another outstanding book by her. I thought this was just as good, if not better, than The Miracles Now, but I would recommend reading both because you get new information from each of them. So this one is written in 12 chapters. Obstacles are detours in the right direction. I loved that one. When you think you've surrendered, surrender more. I loved that one too. Those are just the chapter titles, obviously, but this is another one that I'm going to read a second time. I read right through this in like a week because I was just devouring it. My soul was just soaking this up, but I will read it again and then really go through and underline and sticky note all of the things that I want to highlight for myself. But if you're going through any hard times in your life, which I have been over the last several months, or even if you're not and you just want to bring more joy into your life, then I highly recommend picking this up. Okay, last for the nonfiction stack. This is a book that just came out the beginning of the month. I am so in love with this book. I cannot recommend this enough. If you are an entrepreneur, especially if you are a woman entrepreneur, this is called In the Company of Women, Inspiration and Advice from Over 100 Makers, Artists, and Entrepreneurs. And it is by Grace Bunny, who is the creator and founder of the blog Design Sponge, and also authored a couple of other books, I believe. And her story is amazing in itself, but she went and interviewed over 100, so more than 100 women all over the country, and actually there's some from that are international, I believe, about, you know, what they wanted to do when they were growing up, like what they thought they wanted to be when they were little, what characteristics they most admire in other women, favorite things about their workspaces, a fear or professional challenge that keeps them up at night, what is the biggest sacrifice they've made in their career or line of work, what is something they would tell themselves 10 to 20 years ago if they could go back in time, what tool or object or ritual could you not live without in your workday, what is your no-fail go-to when you need inspiration or get out of a creative rut, or to get out of a creative rut. So there are a lot of, they're short, you know, they're just like 2 pages mostly, but there's so many different people in here, and I just admire these women and find so much inspiration from reading this. I actually am not quite finished. I read about 2/3 of it, but I figured I'd include it in this because I'm filming this a couple days before the end of October, and I'm definitely going to finish it before the end of the month. Alright, now on to my fiction reads for the months of September and October. I had quite a few nonfiction books that I read, so I only read 3 fantasy books during those 2 months, but this one I read in September, which was Red Rising. This is the first in a trilogy, and I've heard a lot of different things about this throughout booktube, but wanted to give the trilogy a try for myself, and I enjoyed this. I gave it, I think, like 4.5 stars out of 5. I can't quite remember. I had a slow start on this one because I was going through a bunch of health stuff and like picked it up, put it down, picked it up again, so it wasn't necessarily the book's fault that I had a slow start getting through it and why it took me a while to complete. But by the middle to end of this book, I was really into it and had to keep reading to find out what was going to happen. It is sort of a futuristic sci-fi fantasy book, and it takes place on Mars, like hundreds and hundreds of years from now. And I'm sure you guys have heard a lot about this book if you've been anywhere on YouTube in the last, you know, couple of years, but I will be getting the 2nd and 3rd to finish the series, but it wasn't something that I was like, oh, I have to read them instantly right now, because I had this huge stack of other books that I wanted to get to, but it's definitely on my to-read list to finish these. I really liked it and can't wait to find out what happened. Next, I read The Beauty of Darkness. This is book 3 in the Remnant Chronicles by Mary E. Pearson. I adore this whole trilogy. I loved this book as an ending. It was beautifully written. She writes boldly but beautifully, and I just really enjoy her writing style, and just really enjoyed my time in this world and was sad to see it come to an end. But the way that she wrapped it up was satisfying. I really enjoyed the multiple point of views that we get and the character development throughout all 3 books and where they finally end up here in this 3rd one. And I feel like I've been on such a long journey with these characters, and it took so many twists and turns that I didn't see coming, and I was just, you know, really found myself really enmeshed I found myself really engrossed in this story. I think because this book has such a well-rounded cast, and like there are so many different points of view that we're getting, and I really come to care about more than just the main character or two. Like I began to care about, you know, so many of them, even ones that you weren't sure were really on necessarily a good side. The main character, though, also Leah, she has overcome so much in the course of this story, and I found myself being really proud of her and just rooting for her. And she deals with, you know, coming of age and sexism and kind of fear of her destiny, and then embracing her destiny, and it's really quite amazing, and I can only hope that I will be able to write something this good. We'll see. NaNoWriMo is coming, and my novel writing experience is about to commence. Lastly, I read Empire of Storms, which is book 5 in the Throne of Glass series by Sarah J. Maas. Oh, this book. I've been waiting for this book to come out for so long. I think there's one more in the series, and this one did not disappoint. I gave it 5 out of 5 stars, like all of her other books that I've ever read. And this book was dense. It took me a while to get through. It's almost 700 pages, but it's not that it was hard to read or that it was too long. Like, it took me almost 2 weeks to get through, I think, because I was like, well, I was reading a couple of other books at the same time, but I was also just trying to savor it because I love being in the worlds that Sarah J. Maas creates. And this one was, you know, by the time you get to a 5th book in a series, there's so many things in motion and so many things intersecting and interacting, and stories that are now crossing, and there's a ton of different point of views in this book, and it was almost too much to keep track of at certain points. But not quite. It was very rich with history. We go back to see some kind of missing loopholes from previous books in here that were, you know, questions are finally answered, and so that was really exciting. And I love the main character in this book. I also love so many of the side characters, and I came to love some of the darker characters in this book. And this book, by the way, was so full of action. It was just like non-stop blood and gore and battle and swords and power, and whew, and there was a lot of sex too. More sex than any of her other books in this series. I don't know if her publishers are like pushing her to insert more sex scenes. It almost seemed like there was too many, like it didn't need that much. Comment down below if you've read this and you agree. I don't know. There was like either just battle happening or sex happening, and there wasn't a ton of in between, but it was enjoyable and very fast-paced, and the way that it left off, oh my god, it just like ripped my heart out, and I don't know what's gonna happen in the last book, but we shall see. Alright, so that is a wrap for this video. Those are the books that I read in September and October of 2016. Let me know what books you've read recently down in the comments below. I would love to know. Let me know if you've read any of these books and what you thought of them also, and what you're hoping to read in the next month. As I mentioned before in a previous video and briefly here, I will be taking part in NaNoWriMo in November. So I'll be writing a novel, at least 50,000 words by the end of November, and I don't really think I'm gonna set a TBR for November because most of my extra time is going to be dedicated to writing, obviously, but I will need some breaks, and besides, you know, watching some TV. I've been loving Smallville lately, guys. They just added the whole series on Hulu. It's like a major throwback show from like late 90s, early 2000s, but anyway, I digress. There's only one book that I'm going to set aside to read when I have time in November, and that is called Uprooted by Naomi Novik. Love that she shares my first name. I've been wanting to read this book for a long time, and it is a standalone, so I figured, you know, I don't really want to be starting a new series or anything during the month that I'm also writing a book. So this is a nice sized book that I can just kind of work on throughout those 4 weeks. If I have time, not gonna hold myself to it because I hopefully will be very productive at my keyboard. We'll see. Alright guys, thanks so much for watching. Give this video a thumbs up if you enjoyed it, and I will see you in my next video very soon. Bye!